Thank you so much. We're so delighted to be here tonight. I've known Alice now for a long time, not long enough. Of course, I wish that I'd met her when I was growing up, but maybe a dozen years or so. But one of the fun things for me tonight is that there will be a lot that is said that I have not yet heard. Every time somebody sits down with her, something kind of wondrous and new comes out. It's just a kind of extraordinary thing, and we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight, because Alice, one of the things that you really deeply represent is change, hope, kind of beauty, and the newness of things, the kind of springing of things, but you also represent history, tradition, a great, great reverence for what was. And I'm always amazed by how what you do has this resonance of the past and also this kind of extraordinary beauty of the present. And so my first question for you is, what does that have to do with food?
Well, you know, I went to France when I was 19. And I felt like I'd never really eaten before. And I came into this beautiful place of Paris, and I went to the first lunch in the cafeteria of the school, and everybody was seated at the table. And you had a tray, and you went through this line, and they had pâté, and they had eggs mayonnaise, and all of these things that I had no idea about. And I would sit down there, very, very intimidated, not speaking a word of French, but just kind of taking it in. And you know, it was revelatory to me to get a hot baguette and eat it with apricot jam, and the way the students interacted with each other, and all the cultural events were free for students, and I heard David Oistrakh play. And I just, when I came back home, I wanted to live like that. And I had no idea really what I had taken in during that year, and I started to cook.
And that was in 1965 that you went to France. You were an undergraduate at the University of California, Berkeley. And you came back.
I came back. I guess I had a little moment in Berkeley in the 60s. Didn't we all? So I was, let's say I was predisposed to, I was opened up in some way by that whole experience, and the whole anti-war movement, the idea that we could get together and we could stop this thing from happening. And I felt very empowered by that. And I just felt like, you know, I was part of that counterculture movement, and I could do whatever I wanted to do. I never sort of questioned it. I just went for that. And I wanted to live like that. That's really I wanted to eat like that. I wanted to eat, and I had that taste in my mind. And I still have that taste in my mind.
But before you opened Chez Panisse, you actually thought you wanted to be a teacher. And I think actually it's a fair statement that you are a teacher. But you actually became a Montessori school teacher. And you did that for a little while, but that didn't stick.
Well, I was very intimidated by the 3-year-olds. And I mean, that's the truth. I have such, there they are, running away. But I thought, you know, I wished that this had been the way that I had learned things, was by doing them, by touching things, moving the little beads along and counting, learning to count, all of the sort of Montessori equipment was so beautiful, and the little squares of tiles of different colors and matching things up, and it felt like I was learning by playing games. You know, I didn't, and the kids felt that too. They were very, it's like what's happening at the Edible Schoolyard now. As soon as kids go out in the garden, they don't feel like they're in school. So no matter what's going on, they take it in a different way.
And you obviously there look, listen, touch, smell, taste. So these are things that you really were teaching and learning.
Well, Montessori believed in the education of the whole child, and those pathways, those are the senses that bring information into your mind. And so if your senses are closed down, only a certain kind of information can come in. And I think that, you know, poverty, hunger, and all kinds of difficulties in children's lives, really, in all of our lives, close us down. And what Montessori was talking about, and she was a doctor, was that when you become re-engaged with the world around you, that you really begin, it's like you're making a jailbreak. You know, you come out into this beautiful world of the senses. And I really believed in that. It's what happened to me. And it's how I opened up, really, in France, and then I could teach that.
And so when you opened Chez Panisse, it was in 1971. It was a little house on a little street in Berkeley. And as I understand it, the day that you opened, there was no sign for the restaurant. So I believe David Goins actually chalked on a piece of wooden fence. He wrote the name of the restaurant in chalk. And that's you, I think, on the opening
I think that's me.
Day. What was going through your mind that day?
What was going through my mind? Well, I was trying to put down the carpet up the stairs before people came in the front door, and it was one of those used oriental carpets that goes down the stairs, and I had a hammer and nail, and I was just trying to get it in there firmly enough that people could walk up to the restroom upstairs, and it just, I have no idea what happened that night.
What was happening in the kitchen?
I have no idea what was happening. I know what we served. I know what we tried to serve, but a lot of people didn't get served that night. And they have little memories that they come up. They ultimately became wonderful customers of the restaurant, but we didn't quite have enough food, and it's one of those crazy Berkeley moments.
Which also brings me to the kind of astonishing fact that, most chef restaurateurs, most proprietors of world-famous restaurants went to culinary school of some kind. You didn't train at all.
Well, maybe I had the best kind of training because I went to France at a beautiful moment in time, a time when they were really an intact slow food culture. And you went to the market twice a day, because what came in the afternoon was fresher than what came in the morning. And I had an education of my palate, and I went out to Brittany and ate oysters right at the waterfront. They just opened them up on the beach, and I ate the oysters. And when I came back, I wanted oysters like that, and I ordered them all the time, but they never tasted that way. And I started to put together in my mind that it has to do with the aliveness of food.
The aliveness of food.
The aliveness of food. I just love having this little beautiful pot of herbs there that are indeed alive. And they are my inspiration. It is that brings me to cooking and eating. I feel it.
And I think that what happened in Berkeley was that when you weren't able to find the tastes and the flavors and the aliveness that you wanted, you sort of put out a Allpoints bulletin and said to people, I'm looking, right?
I'm looking, yes. And we were trading. We were getting people to bring in things from their backyard, and we would give them a lunch. And we did this sort of under the table kind of exchange, shall we say. It's the first time I ever had a fingerling potato. Was in the early days when a German couple, brought us in a little bag, and they wanted 2 lunches. It was so charming. But I thought that just sort of opened my mind to that strange shape, and they treated it that way, like it was something very precious. It was very precious to them.
And I think also right from the beginning, I've heard from friends of yours that the food, of course, was very, very important, critically important, but there was something else that you were striving for, which had something to do with that sense of familiarity and conviviality and welcome that you wanted everyone to experience.
Well, I just wanted to give away all the food. And that's the truth. I really loved, just getting people to eat things that they'd never had, and sort of having them feel like they were in my house, and if they wanted more that they could have it. And it was always very hard for me to, have them pay.
And I think you had a few investors.
I did have. Well, you know what kind of investors we had back in the 60s. The kind that got their money under the table, I think. But it was great. I mean, there was something really, I think my greatest sort of financial deal I made was that I rented this house, but I wanted an option to buy it. And I wanted to take off all the improvements we made off the purchase price. And so we bought Chez Panisse for $28,000. and it saved us because we didn't make any money for 8 years. And so
Because you were giving all the food away.
well, probably. Well, we didn't have an accountant. That was one of the problems.
So eventually you realized that you needed to look a little bit farther afield.
We did.
Sorry.
No, go on.
So
Go on.
you realized you needed to look a little bit farther afield, right? You needed to forage.
We did, and we really went along the streets of Berkeley and just looking out there to see what was edible. That has been sort of part of my life ever since. I'm always looking to see what kind of tree that is, or whether there's anything that we could really not only use in the restaurant, but something that was something I could just pick for myself at home. I love that idea of walking in the woods and not only discovering mushrooms, but just what did people eat when they lived in the outdoors.
And that's, one definition of simple food, what's there, what you can forage for. But of course, in this book, which is the second in this series, The Art of Simple Food 2, I think the word simple is something interesting that we should pull out and take a look at. What does that mean, simple food? Because certainly lots of the things that Chez Panisse represents in the culinary world, and indeed, quite a few of the recipes in here wouldn't really be called simple in terms of their preparation.
Well, I guess I think of simple as the really the philosophy of eating, that the ideas are so straightforward that you eat in season. You eat what is locally available to you. You eat food that is grown in harmony with nature. You eat, you eat what is natural and right. You eat with your family and friends. You can cook very, very simply. Yes, I mean, there's that. And I think that Michael Pollan's description of the fruit bowl at the back of that book, that red book that you have there, is really what Chez Panisse is all about and what I think of as simple. And it's that you choose what is completely ripe. You have a lot of discernment. Once you learn to taste, it's so easy to serve delicious food. I mean, it's just like, you know what a raspberry tastes like, and you can. That's all you need. Mm-hmm. And I think people, I mean, certainly in this country, are very intimidated by cooking. And I'm just, there was a French chef who came to Chez Panisse in the early 70s, and he said what they're doing at Chez Panisse, they said, that's not cooking, that's shopping, you know? And I was very offended by that. And now I just am so proud of it. I was just shopping. Wasn't, I mean, and actually these same Frenchmen are really focused on the food, you know, where it comes from now. So it is all about that, but they took that, and I think that's what happened in France, is they took their goodness of food for granted. And I'm never going to make that mistake. I'm always going to treasure the farmer. I'm always going to pay the producer the real cost of food. I'm always going to tell him or her how beautiful it is and what we use it for, because I never want to lose them. They make Chez Panisse what Chez Panisse is. And they need to be celebrated the way teachers need to be celebrated. They're feeding us, and it's such a beautiful thing.
In this book, which was written a long time ago, the Chez Panisse Menu
Very
Cookbook, which I adore, it's a treasure of mine. You talk a little bit about this. I'm just going to read a tiny bit. I have not attempted in this book to oversimplify the problem of obtaining first quality ingredients, nor have I de-emphasized the sometimes exorbitant cost demanded by those who can supply exceptional or unusual foodstuffs. In the same vein, I have not attempted to simplify the complex preparation of an apparently simple dish. Remember that the ultimate quality of a dish is determined initially by the worth of the ingredients and the time and effort expended by the cook. Certainly some dishes require a little less complex presentation, but those are usually the dishes which require an additional application of diligence in the selection of the raw ingredients. Now, having been to a farmer's market with you, several actually, in several different countries, I know that you are extraordinarily diligent in that. How did you learn? And how can you teach somebody else to be diligent in their choice?
Well, I really learned by doing. I went there, I asked the questions, I just tasted it, I took it home. I mean, it's what happens all the time at Chez Panisse, and because we only had one menu at the beginning, we had to be on the search always for different things and different varieties of things. And so I think we learned more quickly than restaurants that had a fixed price menu and an a la carte menu. We wanted to excite people and not feel like we were cooking the same way every day. And so it just pushed us into this other place where we're tasting and comparing.
And when you're talking to cooks today who maybe obviously don't have your sense of competence or self-confidence, how do you get them to trust their own instincts?
Well, I think it's a lot of trial and error, and you have to believe that the techniques for learning to cook are so simple. I mean, really, they're so simple. It's just doing them over and over again, and by the third or fourth time you've made that vinaigrette, you have the hang of it. And then when you've roasted a couple chickens, you know how to do this. And then you begin all the variations. I mean, but the techniques are the same. It's what I wrote in the Green Kitchen book that I asked all my friends who were cooks and who cooked different kinds of food, Rick Bayless, and Mexican food, and David Chang, and various people contributed to that book because I wanted to demonstrate that these techniques can be applied to any kind of cooking. I mean, things like steaming and sautéing and knowing how to cook vegetables easily and prepare them. I mean, these are universal techniques. And once you know, it's so easy.
I have heard from someone who apprenticed in the pastry department at Chez Panisse that after 3 months she had still not made a tart. She was still making the raw ingredients for the pastry chefs to make the tart.
Well, I always thought that really, if I were going to have a cooking school, that I would have people be out in the garden for the first 6 months, maybe the first year. And then they would come in and then they would see all of these ingredients, and then we would begin to cook, because it does begin in the garden, really, truly. And it's the right seed in the right place. It's knowing when to pick it, how to take care of that seed, how to bring it to the restaurant. I mean, that's even Alain Ducasse says that's 85% of cooking.
And the local and seasonal, of course, is the ripeness. The aliveness is so important. I think this quote is really marvelous. I loved being a waitress. I was good at persuading people who balked at being offered no choices that they were going to love what we were serving.
I haven't read that in a while.
So you would decide based on what was freshest and most delicious and most ripe, and you would make that meal, and that's what people would eat.
It's true. Well, at the beginning, we were a little afraid, and we didn't offer it really on the menu, but it was in the back that if somebody had to have a steak, we would offer it. But then ultimately, they didn't want the steak. So, beautiful thing.
So searching for ingredients takes us very quickly to the farmers. And growing your own?
Well, I couldn't find a salad for Chez Panisse that I really wanted. And so I think that I might like to take credit for mesclun salad. I might like to do that, but I am so ashamed of what has happened to that beautiful little salad in the fast food culture. Because Dole Pineapple has packaged that salad, a salad that is different colors and has the illusion of that little precious mix of salads from the south of France. And they call it mesclun. And it's really a salad that was sold in the farmers markets by the peasants who, in the spring and in the summer, they were always taking the little ones and bringing them to the market in a big, almost like a big handkerchief, a big towel, and you pick up this wild salad, and it had rocket in it and chervil in it and a little chicory, and they put a strong dressing on it, and I loved it so much. I got the seeds from France, and I put it in my backyard. So for the first, I don't know, there were 10 years, no, not 10 years, maybe 5 years, I had a farm in the back of my house. And then we met Bob Cannard. Does anybody know Bob Cannard in this room? Ah, you have to meet him.
Bob Cannard is the farmer who probably supplies more than, right? More of the fresh produce than any other single purveyor or producer to Chez Panisse. He's also a wonderful teacher.
Well, he said when I first met him that his carrots had 10 times more nutrition than anybody else's. And I said, oh, Bob, oh, Bob. And I told people that, but, I didn't believe it. And now I believe it. And I believe it because he actually spoke recently at the University of California as part of our edible education course that we do with Michael Pollan, and this year with Raj Patel leading it. It's an amazing course, and credit is given for that course at the university. And different people come in to teach it. And Bob Cannard came in this year, and he explained to the students that it's just like in a family. If your family really loves you and gives you all that they can give you, nurturing you, that you'll grow up to be a pretty special person. And so that's what he does to the carrots. He allows the soil to be all that it can be for the carrot. And the carrot soaks in that nutrition of the land. And it really made sense to me.
What is an adolescent carrot up to?
Who knows? Well, he never liked adolescent carrots. He always liked carrot to be not, he never wanted to pick little baby carrots. He didn't believe in those, and he still doesn't believe in those. And so he likes mature carrots, not big overgrown ones, but he likes them, again, to have everything that they need, to not pick too young. Part of the wholesomeness.
So that brings us to the world of edible education as we saw it invented in the mid-1990s by Alice when she established the first edible schoolyard ever at the Martin Luther King Jr. Middle School in Berkeley. Just quickly, I know from talking to you many years ago that you drove past this school every day on your way to work, and you saw a kind of a really abandoned area with asphalt and broken glass and graffiti, and you felt terrible about the way that this school was being treated, and also what was the experience of these kids if this was the kind of place that they were coming to every day to be educated and ideally to be nurtured. And so you took this area, you went to the school principal, had a conversation, and he said...
we had a very interesting conversation. I mean, he was very alarmed that I could publicly talk about his school in such a way, and he really knew something about Chez Panisse and farms, and he thought that if he called me up that I could help him to beautify his school. But when we met, we walked around the grounds, and it was built really for 500 kids on 17 acres of land back in 1921. And pretty much all of the school grounds had been, asphalt sort of playgrounds covering the area, and except in the front, and it was just kind of torn up grass and graffiti on the windows and all of that. And he wanted some flowers planted on the front. But when I walked around the school, I just had this vision. And I had the vision from the very first day. I just thought, we can plant, dig up all that asphalt, plant all the fruits and vegetables we need to grow. We can feed every child a free school lunch, that we can teach them about gardening and integrate all the classes. We can build a cafeteria where people who wanted to help with the schools could prepare the vegetables. So it had to be a big cafeteria so that we could have every child sit down, and it could be like a class, a language class in the cafeteria where they're all eating wonderful tortillas and speaking Spanish. And I just, the whole thing came to me about the curriculum, and in a Montessori pedagogy. And I wanted the whole thing.
And how much have you gotten?
Well, I really thought, well, I have to say that the principal of the school said, well, thank you very much. We'll be calling you. Don't call us, we'll call you. And I was very surprised when he called 6 months later. And he said, come on down. And I said, he said, I know you want free school lunch for every kid here and real food, but don't talk about that yet. It's just our own little secret. We'll start on the other part, and then we'll do that. And so we proceeded to plant that vacant lot. And
this is the same picture from the same vantage point today.
But it was a beautiful thing. We had an enlightened principal. He's an amazing, amazing person. Unfortunately, he went on and left the school. And so did the superintendent of schools, changed. And when that happened, our sort of, our compact that we had could not be fulfilled. Even though we rebuilt the cafeteria, the school was so needy, the whole school system was so needy, that they wanted the space to prepare food for all the other schools in Berkeley.
And so the new cafeteria that the foundation helped to construct then became a production kitchen for all of the other schools in the district. And yet, Alice, you have always remained uncompromising and very clear about the first principles. And you've always said the same thing, which I think is maybe worth it to bring up in front of this audience, because I know you're all, so dedicated to this same kind of work, which is you may not get there on the first go or the second go or the fifth go, but to know actually where you're heading and to be able to articulate that and to stick to it, I think has really been proven in this instance to be really invaluable, because this school actually is, I'm going to read you something that the founding executive director of the program wrote a couple of years ago. There's now an elegant history to this lush plot of urban land, a deeply embedded history, embedded in the culture of the Martin Luther King Middle School. A generation of kids has moved asphalt, made and spread compost, planted trees, built a tool shed, and laid the foundations for a greenhouse. They have cleared brush and moved 3,000-gallon tanks into place to catch the water that will irrigate a new lower orchard. They have named and renamed chickens. At the King School today, food is an academic subject. Children do learn by doing, and beauty is a living language.
Oh, that's nice.
Marcia Guerrero. And you know, that's really a beautiful testament to something very real that's happened. And at the same time, Alice has co-created edible schoolyards around the country, and some of them in different ways, different schools are leading the way. Maybe you want to talk for a moment about what's happening in New Orleans, where right after Hurricane Katrina, we established the first other edible schoolyard. That is to say, there was the founding edible schoolyard in Berkeley, and we set about starting 6 others around the country to demonstrate the proof of concept. And the very first one was in New Orleans. It has spread now from the first charter school in which it started now to 5 schools and growing. And I know that experience was very, very meaningful to you.
Well, it was so, I mean, it was so fertile. The place was, there was such need after Katrina that everyone wanted to take care of the children, take care of the schools. And so when my friend Davia met a philanthropist in New Orleans, they called me on the phone and said, you know, can we bring the principal of the school up to see the edible schoolyard, and maybe he can bring some of the teachers, and when they see what you're doing, I think they're going to be really, really impressed. And in fact, they were. And so we went down and helped them begin. And it really helped me to understand that this is a set of values. Those slow food values that we all know deep inside us, and that every place interprets them differently. And in New Orleans, it was just, yeah, I mean, they just felt at home there, all of these ideas, and they were embraced, and the children started planting and taking the garden as their own. And the beautiful thing that I discovered the last time I was there, that the money that they were getting from FEMA to rebuild schools was building actual kitchens in schools and actual garden spaces in the schools. So the actual government money was making this happen.
This, by the way, is a photograph of the Ramada at the Edible Schoolyard in Berkeley, and it's been copied by a lot of other schools, and many other schools have their own areas of gathering gardens or have come up with this idea independently. But it's kind of where a lot of things begin and end in the garden. Classes begin there and they also end there. It's a gathering place where people can share the tasks of the day, so then they disperse and actually complete them and then come back together to discuss. And in many ways, I think, Alice, it's kind of it's sort of a great symbol, right, for the sort of gathering, the coming to the table of the group.
It's true. I mean, it's that exchange of ideas in a beautiful place. And I think one of the things that has distinguished the Edible Schoolyard is the care that we take around the setting of a table. Now, I was just at the Edible Schoolyard the other day. I was a judge for the Iron Chefs, and so it's great. I mean, it's just a great sort of exercise in the kitchen classroom. And this happened to be 8th graders who were doing this. And I was part of the judging group, but they had a couple of teachers, really people that they respected and wanted to impress. And they were being judged on all kinds of things. They were on not just presentation and tastes, but how well they worked as a group together, how they set the table, how they cleaned up after themselves, how sort of healthy the meal was. And I was astonished. Well, first of all, I mean, one of the things very early on is we encouraged them to think of a centerpiece for the table. And that day, one of the kids had a big rock that was so beautiful and put it as the centerpiece on the table. And I just thought, you know, he should get some points for this. I mean, it's just so unusual that would be, I mean, it was a very beautiful rock with mica in it. And it's just, it was special. But the conversation that was happening around the table, it could have been the kitchen of Chez Panisse. They were saying, oh, do you think we should saute that? Or do you think we should roast it in the oven? No, I think there's more flavor if we roast them. Remember, if you roast them, they still keep their color. And then one would say, oh, you do the best of that. You should do that job. You know, and then we can always chop some herbs on the top if it doesn't look as nice as it should. You know, I mean, just this amazing conversation.
So those are 8th graders, and Iron Chef is a kind of a grand finale because for the first time, they come into the classroom and they are confronted with a group of big, beautiful tray of ingredients and no recipe, no instructions. It's the first time that no teacher says anything to them about what to do, and they must then, in their group, decide what is the meal that they're going to prepare. There are teams of, there's 3 different teams, and they set about making all these decisions by themselves. And the kind of mastery that you see in these discussions.
And it's just, I love that the whole Edible Schoolyard idea is non-gender specific. So you have these groups, I mean, these are teenagers who normally hang out on one side of the playground with all the guys and all the girls on the other side. And they are like a little group that is working together, both in the garden and the kitchen. I think we all need to learn that these are the basic tasks of life. Cooking for ourselves, cooking for our children, engaging in the growing of food, and to learn it in such a deep way that it's meaningful as a teenager is something pretty special.
So we now want to show you just a very short video of a class. These are actually 6th graders you're about to see. And Esther Cook, which is actually her name, is the master teacher.
Can you hear that?
Yeah.
That kind of squeakiness? This is how fresh these are. These were literally picked about, 40 minutes ago in the garden.
The title for this lesson is Greens Over Grains. It's very basic. We want them to learn to identify the greens that we grow in the garden.
And what is this one?
Bok choy.
Bok choy. Very good. Yes, this is bok choy.
They've had 5 weeks out in the garden so that by the time they come into the kitchen, they're really familiar with the crops that we grow, and they don't come in expecting to make cupcakes and cookies.
This is a rainbow chart, and I'm cutting the stems out. It's like this really beautiful plant, and it tastes good.
So we talked about amaranth. We talked about barley. Does anybody remember seeing any quinoa out there in the garden?
This is actually connects to a history lesson where they're studying about the domestication of grains. They've also done some threshing and winnowing.
We've done the whole process, and it feels really good when you eat it because you know you did all this.
I know, it's kind of crazy. The biggest knife we use to cut things down very, very small. As you start going
This lesson was designed that all of the jobs are really about cutting. Everybody gets a chance to use a knife, whether it's a paring knife or a chef knife. These are what adults use. These are not dumbed-down kids' tools. By the time they're done with this lesson, they will have practiced taking a knife out of the toolbox, using it properly on a cutting board, washing it, and returning it to the toolbox.
Oh yeah, that's sizzling. We can do a little more, I think.
Fortunately for us, we don't really have to deal with a gender issue in the kitchen in terms of boys thinking that they don't cook. They watch cooking shows. They see people doing things and they want to do it too.
You can sniff, you can smell, you can get your first bite ready.
I do feel like the kitchen is the perfect classroom because not only is it a delicious reward at the end of your work, but there's so many ways to really engage all of your senses. Notice the smells of things as you cut them, notice the appearance and the sound.
Like all the color rainbows are in there.
Will you please count everything?
We really want to make room for these kinds of observations, but also definitely room for some silliness and some fun.
Let's cook. I just got a huge piece of ginger.
And who was the person who cut up the ginger?
Me.
So today, the Edible Schoolyard Network, and you all have a map out in the lobby of the 120 programs in the Chicago area, greater Chicago area, that are members of the network. The network now has almost 3,400 members, and we are so proud to be representing the edible education movement, and really look forward to having all of you come and visit edibleschoolyard.org and seeing what we're up to there. We have a very wide variety of resources, both ones that we have created at the Edible Schoolyard in Berkeley and ones that our sister programs have created, the other founding Edible Schoolyards, and many, many other programs that have joined us since. So it's a great place to find resources, and we also ask people who have resources that they would like to share to upload them. It's a beautiful community. It's growing very, very quickly. And Alice, of course, you're at the heart of it. So I think a question that a lot of people have for you is, what's next? And in a moment, we're going to open up to questions so that maybe you can tell people that and other questions other answers that they might have to other questions. But I also have in my hand something that some of you may have seen or not. Charlie Rose asked Alice a while ago to write a letter to her younger self. And what you wrote, I think, is really, really interesting. I'm going to read some of it just quickly, and then I'm going to give it to you to read. The beginning is pretty great. The beginning says, "Hey, you. Hey, you. I bet you don't want to listen to anything I have to say. You've got such an independent streak. I know that. You don't want anyone telling you what to do. I know it's hard for you to just sit there and listen patiently, but please, I have some important things I want to tell you. First, don't ever lose that sense of independence or doubt it. It's your greatest strength. The way you see the world, the way you feel in the world, the ideas that come to you about this world, trust them, even if they fly in the face of what others tell you is real or possible. And there's going to be a lot of that. But those feelings, those intuitions are going to lead you to engagement with the world far beyond your wildest expectations. Even if the way you're seeing things feels like the loneliest place in the world, trust it. It's the greatest thing any of us can do, actually, to trust our instincts. And trust your senses, especially your sense of taste. You probably aren't even aware of how sensitive you are now, but believe me, my dear, your sense of taste and smell and touch and sight, they're going to be your personal treasure. They're everyone's personal treasure. Some people just aren't aware of it. Not everyone's tastes or smells are as intense as yours when you're out in your parents' victory garden in the backyard sneaking those strawberries. Your senses will lead you to people and places that will fill your life with richness and happiness and give it meaning and depth. And believe it or not, you will find your life's joy in helping others bring their senses alive, helping them to open up to the beauty and the vibrancy of the world around them. And now I'm going to give it to you. And I'm going to ask you to read this on the last page there.
It's hard for me to read. I did it one time, but can I do it again? And I know this sounds crazy because you're such a picky eater, and all you want to eat right now is a strawberry milkshake and a grilled cheese sandwich. But you're going to start cooking and loving it. Your whole life is going to be centered around cooking. I'm not kidding. You're going to want to go and cook wherever and whenever possible. Most of your greatest experiences and relationships are going to grow out of cooking for other people. And I know you're going to feel self-conscious and insecure about the simple, ways you'll want to serve food, but don't be. Your way of cooking will be a revelation. Not only to yourself, you can have
Keep going.
No, I can't.
Keep going.
It's so, it's so obvious to me, and it seems like it should be second nature. And to think that I could even be sitting on this stage talking about something that people have known about since the beginning of time, and yet somehow in this world that we live in, it seems new, completely like unheard of. And it hits me that way, that I'm just saying something to you that people have. It's not new, it's something so old. Anyway, you'll find that cooking is a way to build community when communities are falling apart all around the world. You can't comprehend this now, but cooking real food will become a powerful way to bring people to the table, feed them ideas, and start a revolution. The natural world you take for granted now will become very fragile as you get older, but your interest and love of it will not only inspire you, but will comfort you, and it will help you connect to the land and the farmers. I know you don't like getting your hands dirty, but you're going to become a true friend of the farmers and the growers, so be prepared. Don't be afraid to work hard and realize sometimes that the smallest, dirtiest jobs are often the most important. Don't judge what work is valid and what isn't. Just jump into it and do what needs to be done and keep on doing it. Work and pleasure will become the same thing. Work with your friends because they will become like family, and you won't believe that a small group of like-minded people can achieve. You won't believe. Always collaborate. You are strong at some things, but not everything, and others' strengths will inspire you to create something that is greater than the sum of the parts. But always remember to be grateful. I know that you always have this wild side of you, and you'll have many adventures and romantic relationships, and that's okay. Great, in fact. But I want you to know, see, don't worry about it. They will be married one day. I can't read that, you have to read that.
I know that you'll always have this wild side of you, and you'll have many adventures and romantic relationships, and that's okay. Great, in fact. But I want you to know, so you don't worry about it, that you will be married one day, and you will have a beautiful child. And having that child will not only fulfill you and give you your greatest friend in the world, but it will open up a whole new chapter late in your life, one filled with a brand new passion, transforming public education by awakening children's senses, nourishing their minds and bodies, and teaching them the values that we need for the future.